this opportunity and for hosting us. Coming through the back, I was reminded of my high school days. I was in a lot of plays. I was sort of a thespian, and it's cool to be on stage and sort of back in this environment. So thanks again. As Linda mentioned, my name is Pooja, and I'm a strategist at Salesforce.
And my name is Amy, and I'm a designer at Salesforce.
We want to talk to you guys a little bit about our careers and how we designed our career for impact, and the journeys we took to get to where we are today. So Amy and I, we work at Salesforce, which is a large software company, and we're in a small group within Salesforce called Ignite, which is an innovation and design group. And so as part of this group, we are design thinkers. How many of you are familiar with the term or the field design thinking? Okay, a few hands. Great, so for those of you who have maybe never heard of this term design thinking, very simply, design thinking is a creative approach to problem solving. An approach that you guys might find is actually very useful for some of the challenges that Linda mentioned that you guys are all solving in your respective classrooms. So a little bit more about design thinking. So our instinct when we get a problem or a challenge is to jump to a solution. That's sort of the way our schools are set up. That's just sort of the way that we think and approach challenges. And design thinking is a little bit of a unique approach. So for example, our instinct is to sort of jump to a solution. So if you're given the challenge to build a chair for students, you might just come straight to a single solution. You might think, okay, cool, I have an idea for a potential chair to do that. In design thinking, we might ask some different questions to get to a solution. We might ask things like, what's been done before? What type of chairs have been created and for who? How are students using these chairs? What are the environments that they're using them in? What are some of their pains in using chairs today? What are their activities? What do they do on a daily basis? What's the classroom environment like? How will the chair be made? So we might start to ask these types of questions when we use design thinking. And so the process using design thinking of designing a chair might look something like this. You're given the challenge to design a chair for students. You're first going to start going broad, going into actual classrooms, interviewing teachers, interviewing students, talking to them about how are they using their chairs, what's difficult about learning in the classroom, and really sort of one-on-one get to understand them and their challenges. Then you start to synthesize some of that research. You're going to find a lot of cool information, and we start to think about, okay, what's actually interesting? What type of information can we use to start designing this thing? Then we start making. Design thinking is all about being really tangible and physical, making examples of chairs, or what we call prototypes. So we prototype a ton of solutions, not just one, but 10, 20, hundreds of different types of chairs. And then we sort of refine and hone in on, okay, there's 100 different types of solutions. There's a couple that are going to make most sense for a classroom. And that's the type of process you might use to maybe get to a chair that looks really different. So in this example, this chair was designed using the design thinking process. And some unique features about it is it takes into account storage. So in your classrooms, you might notice there's maybe not a lot of storage space, and you want your books in your backpack with you all the time, so there's a place for that. Or, today we use laptops in classrooms, so we need additional space to be able to use that type of technology or equipment. Or you may want it to swivel, because classrooms are a lot more collaborative, right? And so you want to maybe talk to other students, or look at other students while they're talking, and then also be able to talk to your teacher. So this really starts to take into account some of what's unique about a classroom today. And it doesn't just go from problem to solution, but involves a process to get there.
Yeah, and so this process that Pooja just outlined is something that we use for all of our work. So it's work ranging from projects in global health on child vaccination to designing consumer electronics like smartphones. So no matter the problem that we're looking to tackle, we apply a similar approach regardless of the problem. So we want to share just a couple of examples of projects that we've worked on that help kind of bring this to life and show you how this approach works in action. So for the past couple of years, as you heard earlier, Linda mentioned, I've been fortunate enough to work with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to redesign child vaccination records. So you might be wondering, what is a child vaccination record? Well, we all have gotten them at some point in our life. They're a little card, oftentimes, about this big, and it's the place where the doctor records the shots that were given at between ages of 0 to about a year old. And these shots prevent life-threatening diseases. So they're incredibly critical, and they're even more critical in environments like in India and Africa, where digital systems are not yet widespread. So there is no other record other than this single piece of paper with that life-saving information. So the Gates Foundation recognized that these were incredibly important documents, but they wanted to figure out how can we make them more valuable and make the data more accurate for health workers and caregivers like mothers. And so that's the challenge that we set out to solve. So last year, I had the opportunity to travel to India and actually meet with real users. We met with, this is what they call an ASHA, a social mobilizer, who's responsible for finding mothers in the village and bringing them to vaccination days so that their babies can stay healthy. And so we sat there and we interviewed the ASHA in her context, in her village, and talked to her about what her life was like in doing her job. And we started to look for challenges and themes that we were hearing across all of the interviews that we were conducting. And we heard things like, this is the vaccination card in India. So we heard things like, this is a huge record. It takes up a lot of space. My table, my workspace is this small. So in the moment of care, I can't manage this large document. We heard things like, it's paper, it tears easily, and all these extra folds, it often falls apart. And so I knew critical information is really hard for me to keep track of. Things like, the data is hard to fill out. How many people have filled out a form? You come through customs if you've traveled recently and you have the tiny little form field and you can't actually write what you're trying to write in there. Well, imagine the person who's then trying to read that information later and they can't read what you've written. So it's really critical things that can be considered when designing an alternate solution. So we took all those needs and challenges and we hosted a workshop with representatives from India's government and their Ministry of Health. So this was one of the men that we were workshopping with, and he's sitting there prototyping a possible solution for the revised home-based record of a child vaccination record. And so we didn't, you'll notice, it's just markers, paper, pencil. It's super rough at this point. We're just trying to get the ideas out, trying to think as broadly as we can possibly think before we start to refine and iterate. And we're thinking through many different ideas. So it's not just the first one, it's all the different possibilities. And then, once we have many ideas, we'll test those with users. And we heard things like, this is great because there's more room for me to fill out information. It's easier to handle. It's now in a booklet form instead of this huge piece of paper that I don't have enough room to fill out on my desk. So this is just one example of how we used the design thinking approach to solve an issue around child vaccination in low to moderate income countries. And Pooja's going to share another example that's a little different.
So another quick example of how to use design thinking, we also work with large corporations. So for example, we were working with a large consumer electronics company. Many of you are probably familiar with them. I can't say their name, but you probably have their phone in your pockets right now. And they were interested in creating a wearable device for teens. How many of you guys have a wearable device? Some sort of wearable device, like a Fitbit or, okay, so a lot of people. All right, so this was a couple years ago. They were really trying to create this device for folks like yourself. And they came to us and said, how do we create a wearable device that creates meaningful relationships between teens? So there's a lot of stuff on the market, a lot of apps, a lot of different types of technology out there but it was often used to broadcast your life, to tell people what you're thinking about, what you're doing. But it wasn't really useful in connecting with your friends and talking to them directly. And again, this was a couple of years ago. Now there's more technology that does that. And so this company said, hey, I think we need to help teenagers talk to each other, develop friendships, have meaningful conversations. And we said, great challenge. We want to use design thinking to help solve that. So what we did was we started with some market research. Market research means going out and going to Best Buy, going online, finding what types of products are out there today, and what's working about them, or maybe what's not working about them. So we saw some wearable devices, they were really huge and obtrusive, not really conducive to a smaller hand. Some of them were really techy, they're not very fashionable. Some of them are really redundant. You know, your Fitbit can also do what your phone can do. You don't want 5 different devices. So we started to understand, like, what are some of the pains with some of the devices that are on the market today. Then we took that information, we talked to users or real teenagers who wanted devices like this, and we started creating prototypes. Prototypes are sort of early ideas, and we started building them, building the insides, building the outside, building both the software and the hardware, and building lots of different types of examples of what this thing can do. And then we actually tested those ideas with folks like yourself. So it's been a while since Amy and I were in high school, and so instead of guessing what it's like to be in high school, we actually just went to high schoolers and teenagers and asked them, what would something like this help you do? What might be difficult? Okay, we heard it helps me stay on track with my schoolwork, or it helps me connect with my friends and talk to them, et cetera, et cetera. So we got that real feedback in order to make our product better and better. And I wish I could show you the final wearable device, but unfortunately, sometimes the clients don't let us show what we've created. But we were able to create a wearable device, both the hardware and software, that really started to address some of the pain points that people were facing, like yourself.
Yeah, so thanks, Pooja. So doing this kind of work, this approach to problem solving that Pooja and I are very passionate about and excited to do and lucky to do every day in our work, wasn't something that we were able to do immediately. It was a journey for us to get to this point in our careers. And so we wanted to share a little bit more about that experience. And we'll all graduate from high school and then eventually go on to have fruitful careers of your own. So when we were in high school, we were thinking back, what was it like in high school? It wasn't that long ago. This is Pooja and I in high school. We had a very linear view of what our lives would look like once we went to college. So we thought, okay, we'll get into a great college, we'll graduate, we'll start working, we'll maybe eventually get promoted at that job, and then we'll retire. I really didn't have much more insight into what life would look like post-college. And I think that was a lot of because, growing up, I went from 7th grade to 8th grade to 9th grade. It's all very linear. I always went to the next grade in school, but realized when I graduated from college, that's not exactly what happens. Life doesn't progress as linearly as I had expected. So things don't always go as planned. So that's share a little bit today, a little bit of our stories. So like I mentioned, my goal, graduating high school to get to a great college. And for me, that was Washington University in St. Louis. I really wanted to study, at the time, fashion design, and they had strong academics, so I'm super excited about the marriage of those two things at WashU. And so I was absolutely devastated when I got waitlisted. I was so heartbroken. I had my heart set on going there. And so I could have taken, I guess, one of two routes at that point in time. I could have either said, okay, you know what, I didn't get in, I'm going to go to another school that I did get into. Or I could say, no, I'm going to do everything in my power to try and go to WashU because I really want to go there. So I took the second route, and as an aspiring fashion designer, had my mom take a picture of me wearing a shirt that I had designed using washi t-shirt and sent it to admissions. Pretty embarrassing, actually, so looking back. So I don't know that if I ended up getting in. I don't think it was because of my fashion design prowess. I have since switched majors and ended up going to graphic design. But I do think that it was something about the drive and dedication that I showed about wanting to go to that school so badly. And so I realized that it's important to not take no for an answer if you feel strongly about something and you really, really want to achieve it. Just keep trying. It might not happen on the first try. So after I graduated from college, graduating, I decided to go into graphic design, visual communication, and business instead of fashion design. As you can see, my career was not going to be very successful in that. And so I went out to find my dream job. And for me at the time, my dream job was working at a small, trendy design studio in Chicago focused on social impact. I had my heart set on, there was a couple of places, but I had my heart set on working at one of these places. And then I graduated into the Great Recession. And what became looking for my dream job quickly became looking for a job. And so after about a year of looking for a job, I got an offer at a financial services company in a marketing department as the only designer in their team. And I took it. I had been living on my own in Chicago for almost a year, kind of freelancing and to make ends meet, to support myself, and was really excited about having, seeing what the world would be like having a full-time job. And I learned a lot, actually, from that experience. I learned things like, getting to work in the morning, answering emails in a respectful and responsive way, having a lot of actually creative autonomy that, because I was the only designer, that I may not have had working as a junior designer somewhere else. And so I learned from that experience that, be open to learning from any experience, because even if it's not that dream job, there's still a lot that you can take from any experience that you participate in. So that was a great thing to think back on our lesson. So after a couple of years there, it's been about 2 years there, I again wanted to find that dream job, and it was still the same goal, that trendy design firm, small, focus on social impact, design social impact. I had been looking around for a while, and I wasn't really coming up with much. And so I realized, in order to make this happen, maybe I would need to take a step back to take 2 steps forward. So I applied for a 9-month fellowship program with a design firm called Firelight Design. It was the first year they had run the program. It required me to quit my job as full-time, get paid almost nothing, and just kind of go for it and see what happened. It was a huge risk, and I had to leave kind of the comfort of my full-time job to take it on. But what ended up happening was I met amazing people all over the country, designers working in social impact. I built a network I never would have dreamed imaginable, and had mentorship I never would have thought I would have had the opportunity to have. And coming out of that, it really gave me the springboard to kind of launch my career forward in the way that I was passionate and excited about doing. And so I learned that it's important to take calculated risks in life. Sometimes, with great risk comes great reward, and that was definitely the case. This was such a pivotal moment for me in my career. So coming out of this, having this great momentum, I wanted to continue doing the work that I loved. I was doing design for social impact. That's exactly what I wanted to be doing. I was at a small trendy design firm doing it. And so when I had this momentum, I wanted to figure out, how can I work on the projects that I really deeply care about and want to continue working on at a scale that I want to be working at. And I realized that in order to do that, I would need a team. And that's where I learned about Gravity Tank. I met some people there, saw that there was a lot of heart and passion for using human-centered design to solve real social problems. And I felt like, this is a place where I can get my feet under me and really hit the ground running and try to do more work that I care so deeply about. And so I've had that opportunity at Gravity Tank. I was able to work on a project with youth on the south and west sides of Chicago to brainstorm solutions to violence in their neighborhoods. I was able to go to Africa and India to work on the issues of global health and child vaccination. These are projects I never would have imagined or dreamed of being able to work on. And so I feel so fortunate that, my career has taken twists and turns to lead me to this point. And so I learned that just keep following what motivates you. Just keep doing what you're driven by, what you're excited by. And it might take a few twists and turns, but, eventually, if you keep going for it, I think you can get there. And so we'll see what happens next. Now, Pooja and I are working at Salesforce, and I'm excited to see, what's next and what I'll learn.
And so my story actually has a lot of parallels and similarities to Amy's. So I too wanted to get to the perfect college, and I realized my senior year that was Washington University in St. Louis as well. Really loved the school, loved how small it was. It was far enough away from my parents where I wouldn't have to come home a lot, or they wouldn't visit me too much. So I got in, and I was really excited to go to the school. But as I learned more about it and went through the process, I realized that private school is really expensive. How many of you are applying to colleges right now, or you're probably in already? It's probably, you're thinking a lot about some of the financial burden of going to school. And I had to think through that too. I knew it would be very expensive for myself and my family. And so I considered other options. I really wanted to go to WashU. I had my heart set on it. But I started looking at schools in Illinois. And I ended up finding U of I and going there. It was an incredible experience to go to U of I. Anyone going to U of I in the fall? All right, I see your Illinois sweatshirt. Awesome. And it's an amazing school to go at. It's humongous. And what's awesome about going to a huge school is you meet tons of diverse people from around the world, so many different interests. It starts to really open up your perspective. And I was able to join tons of different clubs. I think at one point I was in 8 different clubs at school. And it just really broadened my perspective. From that experience, I learned to be flexible. You may not necessarily get into your top choice, or there may be some hurdle into getting going to that school or doing that activity. But being flexible, going to U of I was such an amazing opportunity. Second, once I was in school, I wanted to major in something that I was really excited about. And so around my freshman and sophomore year, I went in undecided, and then I picked up sociology as my major. Sociology is the study of people, it's a study of culture, study of the disenfranchised. And so I was really excited to understand this field better and make an impact in this field. But by my sophomore or junior year, I started to get really confused about my major. I liked a lot of things. I was kind of seeing what my roommate was doing and other people, and I knew that I had a lot of interests. It wasn't just sociology, and maybe I should choose a different major, and I was very confused at that point. And so I decided I really liked sociology, but I also wanted to study business. I had a knack for it, I was interested in it, and so I picked up a finance degree. And when I told my career counselor that, I'm going to be doing finance and sociology, she was really confused, and she sort of discouraged me and said, the two majors don't really fit together. Finance is a lot about making money and how businesses work, and sociology is a lot about understanding people, and it was just hard to see the connection at the time. And so she was kind of discouraging me, but I kind of ignored her and took extra credits for a few semesters in order to actually be able to finish the 2 degrees, and just went for it and kind of trusted my gut on it. And from that I learned you have to create your own path. You're going to have people who maybe say no, but it's important to kind of do what you really care about, follow your instinct. After coming out of school, I too wanted to find my dream job, something that mixed all my interests, that paid well, that could get me started in Chicago, living on my own, having my own apartment. And so I ended up finding a job as a management consultant. Management consultants are sort of like doctors for businesses. So when businesses are failing or not doing well, we come in and we help turn around those businesses and help them sort of get their finances and strategy right. And so I was doing management consulting, which was really awesome and exciting, but I was in Excel a lot. I was in numbers all day. I was an analyst, and I wasn't really passionate about numbers. I was also traveling a lot. Every single Monday through Thursday, you go to your clients. So you might be traveling all around the U.S., which sounds very glamorous, But the reality is sometimes I would be traveling to really sort of podunk towns in the middle of nowhere by myself. And so, you know, I knew that that wasn't something I wanted to do in the long term. It was cool and interesting at the time, but not something I wanted to do in the long term. And from there, but, you know, the opportunity to work at a management consultancy was amazing. I got to work with a lot of executives. I got to learn sort of the basics of how to be in the working world, like Amy said, how to send emails right, or how to get along with my colleagues, how to present myself in an organization. And these were super valuable lessons that later on really helped me out. So your first job, it may not be perfect, but there's always something to learn from it. And I'm sure you guys, many of you who maybe are working in the summer or doing side gigs, you're also seeing that, you know, there's a lot to learn from your first jobs. And then more recently, I knew I wanted to, you know, move on from management consulting and do something that I was really passionate about. Something that combined my sociology degree, my business degree, and I also wanted to work in a creative environment. And I came across this field called design thinking and innovation, and I knew I had to do it. I'd never heard of it before, and this was about 6 years ago. I knew that I had to do this type of work. And so I found a company called Gravity in Chicago, and I knew I wanted to work there, but I didn't have any experience. I didn't know, I couldn't really tell you like a lot about design thinking. I'd read a few books about it. And so just to get my foot in the door, I said, hire me, I'll be an intern, and you know, I just want to be here, I just want to work here. And so they did hire me. I was super lucky, but I had to start from the bottom. And like my friend Drake said, starting from the bottom, you know, is difficult. But now I'm here. And so I got to start from the bottom at Gravity and really sort of prove myself and just be a sponge, just learn from everyone around me, get smarter day by day. But it was totally worth it because after 6 years of working in that field at Gravity, at Salesforce, I'm now able to lead teams, I'm able to be a leader in the organization, and it's really sort of positioned me in a good place for my career. So sometimes you have to be patient and perseverant. You might have to take a step back, like Amy said, in order to move forward. But if you get to do the work that you really care about, it's totally worth it. And you know, this is sort of the place that Amy and I are at in our careers, and we know that there's going to be lots of twists and turns to come, and so many lessons to learn along the way. And I think throughout our journeys, we thought it was going to be simple and straightforward, but you know, there's something to learn from every twist and turn, and I'm sure there's going to be so many more challenges for us, but now we're much more eager to face them. Thank you for listening to our stories.